The moment is here, you can stop your search. It's Comics by Perch.
Hey everybody, this is Perch. We got a mail from a viewer. What's this say? This is our old friend Darth Bobcat, who's a good longtime supporter of the channel, somebody I've seen before. Thank you very much for listening and hanging with us. There's a lot of great people who've just stuck with this channel year after year and put up with my silly crap. But anyway, let's see what old Darth Bobcat has to say. He says, "Hey Perch, I want your opinion on something that one of the shop owners on Wes's Comic Aficionados stream," that's a live stream, by the way, it goes on Saturday morning. It's a collection of people. I don't know how Wes does it or why he does it for that matter, but 6 people on the channel, all kind of talking about things. Sometimes it goes out of control. Sometimes it's just good conversation. That's kind of the beauty and the magic of it. People rarely all disagree. I've been on that thing from time to time, and I often find myself not agreeing with what's being said, but I'm also not a douchebag, so I'm not going to sit there and go, I don't, yeah, sir, you are wrong, sir. The last time I did that, I remember it was over a disagreement over somebody was trying to tell me that vinyl records were outselling digital music, and I'm like, no, that's crap. But anyway, but that's an argument for another time. Generally, have a good time. It's a good show. You will agree, you will disagree, you'll laugh, you'll cry. It's all those things. Anyway, one of the shop owners on Wes's Comic Aficionado stream said in response to a question I asked there. I was curious. See, the beauty is, though, on this channel, you can ask your questions and I'll answer them, and there's no super chats, so I'll just do it for free. I'm a whore. Wait, no, take that last part back. Okay, so it says, I was curious what percentage of purchased comics from a comic book shop are actually read by somebody rather than being immediately bagged and boarded. His answer was that he thought 5 to 10% were actually read. Does that number seem off to you? Yes. We'll get to it in a second. If it is right, it might explain why the big two focus so much more on covers than what goes inside the comics, which is depressing. Okay, I don't agree with that number. And I say this now, granted, it's almost, it's like a year and a half, about a year and a half off since my shop was open, and hopefully one day, knock on wood, metaphorically, because I'm in my car. I do not have wood in my car. Knock on vinyl. The comic shop will be open again soon. But generally, from what I saw, the comic books that are getting read, I would put around 60 to 70%. The majority of comics are being read. They're not just immediately going into bags and boards. And here's why I think that. I would offer a service to my pull box customers where the comics would come bagged and boarded. Or I would include bags and boards in their order free of charge if they bought the comics. But I wouldn't bag and board them because some people were particular about that. They wanted to read the comic and then put it into the bag. They didn't want to have to untape, and they didn't want to go through all that. Now, you might ask yourself, why didn't you just bag and board the comic and not tape it? Because I'm not that smart. I don't know what to tell you. I don't have a good answer to that one. Actually, somebody asked me that, way later in the game. It's like, why don't you just put them in the bag and then not tape it, and then you solve both problems. And this is easier. You kind of optimize around that. And I remember looking dumbstruck, like, shit, I could be saving a lot of money on tape. Anyway, it is what it is, folks. But about 60 to 70% of the people who are my pull box customers would request for the comics to be just there and the bags and boards to be separate. They want to put them into the bags and boards themselves, which suggested they were reading the comics. Now, it's possible some of those customers didn't trust that I would not put it into the bag and F it all up, so they wanted to kind of test it for themselves. But when people would come and ring up at the register, they weren't examining the comics. They'd be just I would put the pile there and they'd wave at me just total it all up. And that's what would happen. So, it is, I think that by and large, my belief is the majority, 60 to 70% of the comics, are actually being read. Now, different shops are going to have different things going on, and definitely there's different clientele, and who knows what would happen. But my belief still, overall, and this is from talking to other retailers and kind of getting a general sense of what goes on nationwide, more than half of the comic purchases are read before they're bagged and boarded. Now, here's the problem where I think your statement where you say it's kind of depressing is still true or still apt. It is depressing that 100% of the comics are not being read. So to me, you might say, hey, good news, like 40 to 30% of the comics, it's only 40 to 30% are going immediately into a bag and not being read. Those are from collectors and speculators. That's good news. But really, that's way too high a percentage not to be read. And you're absolutely right. That is exactly why Marvel and DC focus on the covers, because in many cases, they know that part of the buying audience, part of the collecting audience, is what I would call, and what I know other comic shop retailers call, a gallery audience, which means they're buying off the cover, something that looks pretty in the bag and the board, but nobody is actually reading the content inside. And there is a heavy percentage. I mean, if you think about it, you said 5 to 10% are getting read. I'm saying 60 to 70% are being read. That's a massive difference. Except in my case, 30 to 40% are not being read. So, less than half, a little less than half, nobody is reading that comic. That's not good. Nobody should be doing jumping jacks to say, see, people are reading the comic books because 60% of them are being read. That means 4 out of every 10 books are not being opened at all. And to give you some perspective about that, if those 4 customers stop buying comics, if 40% of the comic buying audience from the big 2 just decided we're done and they didn't buy another comic, Marvel and DC would stop operating. I'm serious. Neither company, both companies are profitable, despite what you've heard on live streams and other things. Marvel and DC are turning a profit. Most comic publishers, even the smaller ones, are turning a profit. However, big however, they are not turning a 40% profit. The margin is smaller than that. So if 40% of the buying audience disappeared, Marvel and DC absolutely would be underwater. They would be operating a loss, which means they wouldn't be operating. Neither Time Warner, Discovery, AT&T, or Disney would keep that business going if it was a loss. I know there's been a lot of talk about comics being a loss leader, but that's not how, I can say this with 100% certainty, having talked to people directly about it. Disney would not operate a loss leader business. They would quickly shutter Marvel, they would license out the comic rights to others, and they would wash their hands of it. They absolutely would. Comics cannot take a 40% reduction in sales. So when I say that 40%, 40 to 30%, 30 to 40% of the people buying Marvel comics are not actually reading the comics, they're just putting it directly into the bag, that does mean that there's a collector group out there that is completely hooked on the covers, the variants, and everything else, and they are not actually reading. The story does not matter. And if that group decides comic books are not a good investment, and I think that's not a stretch to say that, then the business collapses. And if the business collapses, then it's over. The other kind of dirty truth nobody wants to tell you is if Marvel and DC go out, if they go out of business, comic shops fold. By and large, comic shops will all fold, and the indies will go quickly with them. Like nobody survives, for all we hate Marvel and DC, nobody survives if Marvel and DC go away. Not the way it's currently structured, not today. They're all dependent on that ecosystem in one way or another. So, my experience, 60 to 70% of the comics are getting read, which means 40 to 30% are going directly into the bag. And that's better than what you heard on the Aficionados show. That's not good. Anyway, what do you think about that? Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course. And thanks for listening.